If you enjoy watching and listening to the sermons online, please consider making a donation to this very important ministry. You can do so by donating on this website, or you can send your donations to First-Plymouth Church, 2000 D Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68502. Your support is greatly appreciated.
In third grade, I fought a boy named Tino. We planned to have the fight after school, way out on the other side of the playground, and some other boys gathered there to watch the spectacle. It lasted 3 seconds. Tino led with a left hook that hit me in the right eye, and I stood there and began to cry. In high school, I laced on the boxing gloves. I'd seen Muhammad Ali float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and I thought maybe I've got some moves. So I stepped into the boxing ring. That bout lasted 8 seconds. I had my hands up high, but the guy led with a left jab that got between my gloves and hit me right on the nose. You know how that kind of discombobulates you? And your eyes start to water. He said, "Dude, are you crying?" I said, "No, you hit me on the nose. My eyes are watering." He says, "Dude, that's what crying is." I was pitching a high school baseball game, and I threw at a guy. I threw a real beanball. I don't remember what I thought he did to deserve it, but a real beanball is when you let loose with a fastball a foot behind his spine, so when they start to bail out, they fall into the ball. I threw it, I nailed him. He tossed down his bat, he started to run at the mound. Thankfully, my catcher caught him and tackled him. I had run out and stood behind the second baseman. I have violence in my soul. I hope it's only a normal amount, whatever normal is, but I have violence in my soul. I can feel anger rise up, and I want to act on it, even physically. I can engage in heated verbal repartee, even with good anger management. Even in my 40s playing basketball, if there's a bad call, we get chest to chest and start, I have violence in my soul. And I have an intuition. I think maybe it's just that normal amount of violence in the soul that can create all the havoc and chaos that we see in our world. I think this, just a normal amount of violence in the soul. When I see internecine tribal warfare in Africa and wild amounts of violence, I still think that maybe under the right adverse circumstances, if you placed me in the right kind of pressure cooker with the fear and the desperation, that maybe just that normal amount of violence can create a tumult. When I look out at the sort of ethnic strife that so troubles the world, I don't think it's anything extraordinary. It's just a normal amount of violence set loose. Set loose. So we need a vision of something different. You see, I can't even really imagine what it would be like to have no violence whatsoever in my soul. But I need to be able to imagine it. I need a higher vision. And our gospel provides the most extraordinary vision of nonviolence and peace. It's almost beyond my imagination. Let me teach you something about our gospel. In first century Palestine, when they sat down to write these stories about Jesus, inspired by God to write these stories about Jesus, they wrote in Greek. Now, the way someone in the late first century would learn how to write Greek is you would sit there and copy Homer. You would copy the Homeric epics. It was a primer. That's how you learned to write in Greek. And so any writer of Greek was steeped in the great stories of Homer's heroes. They knew it in their bones. And so, inspired by God, they wanted to tell a story of their hero, Jesus Christ. And of course, they began to write it just like you would in Homer. This is the template they knew. In Homer, it's the hero that strides into public forums and dispenses wisdom. The hero is a great teacher of wisdom. The hero treats everyone equally. The hero is incredibly egalitarian. They treat a pauper like they treat a king. They treat everyone equally. The hero in Homer is deeply concerned with justice. The heroes in Homer, Hercules, Odysseus, they could heal the sick. They could perform miracles. It's clear when they were writing the gospel and their story of their hero, they were following Homer almost exactly. Until, because they knew Jesus Christ, they had to leave one thing out. Because their hero was different. They left one thing out of the heroic code in Homer. One thing out from that template. Because sooner or later in Homer, sooner or later, the hero will physically vanquish their foe. Sooner or later. Nowhere in our gospel does Jesus physically vanquish anyone. He is a vision of a peacefulness that is soul deep. He is a complete, extraordinary vision of nonviolence, and it's almost hard to believe. I can't even imagine it. I know that I would defend myself. I would engage in violence if I was in danger or my family. I would protect myself. Jesus will not even protect himself. So thoroughgoing is his nonviolence. He'll just die himself then. I can't even imagine this. I know if I'm not a pacifist completely, I might aspire to be, but I would defend our country in peril. I would defend myself. I would self-protect. Jesus doesn't even self-protect. We have in our gospel the most extraordinary vision of peace ever. See, I want the gospel out ahead of me. I want it to be something that I would have to aspire to. I want it this way. I know that I'm not completely a pacifist. I know I have anger and violence in me, but I want a vision of peace out ahead that I can move towards. I need a vision I can move towards. Like Robert Browning said, a man's reach should exceed his grasp. Or what else is heaven for? The gospel should be out ahead of us. The Christ is out ahead and above. I used to have an argument with my dad all the time. My dad and I were best friends, and he was smarter than me and kinder than me. So arguments were great. I mean, I'd always learn something, but he was always incredibly kind, even in an argument. And we would argue theology all the time. We had a blast, but we had one basic difference in style or orientation in our theology. He thought, and he had marvelous ways of expressing this, he thought that Christianity tends to elevate Christ too much. We were talking Christology, the role of Jesus Christ in our faith. And he thought that because we engage in sort of a simple form of hero worship of Jesus Christ, we elevate him so high that we disempower ourselves. That we don't really claim our own power and beauty as human beings because we project it all on Christ. So he thought that for Christianity really to follow its path, we should bring Christ down and empower ourselves. I disagreed almost completely with that. You see, I would argue with him that no, I need Christ higher than me. I'm not disempowered by that. That's what compels me to strive, to reach even higher. I want a Christ higher and beyond. I loved having this argument with him because I could understand his point, but it was just a difference of style. And we all have different styles. But in my imagination, when we gather in this room, we have a vision that is so high and so beyond us. And it's a vision that could heal your soul. I have an intuition that it's just the normal amount of violence that's in our soul that causes all the chaos in our own lives. Just that normal amount of violence. If you take that anger and it's turned inward at all, that becomes depression. If you have some violence in your soul and you turn that upon yourself, it becomes the type of self-loathing where you never feel good enough. You beat up on yourself every day. I know I beat up on myself. I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. Just that little bit of violence turned in becomes this anxiety, this uneasiness we all walk around with. Something doesn't feel right. And then a vision of peace is offered to us that could quiet our souls. You have the most peaceful words ever spoken in your hand. I don't know how a guy could do this, but Jesus Christ could engage in the most social revolutionary speech of all time. I don't know how you do this. He's being a radical revolutionary here, talking about the poor being lifted up, that the last will become first. He's reversing our world once again. You've got this radical vision of social revolution, but it's entirely peaceful. How do you combine those? I don't even know how you do that. He does it. A radical vision, but of complete peace. Blessed are the poor. The kingdom of heaven will be theirs. Blessed are those who mourn. They will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, the humble. They'll inherit the earth. Hear the peacefulness of the Christ. Blessed are you. I know you have sadness. Blessed are you. I know you can feel like you don't have enough. Blessed is your soul. Blessed are you. Blessings.